Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with a super exciting new video for EVE Echoes. Now today we're going to be taking a look at some of the top secret stuff that I've managed to find in the game files on the Fulmination content creator test server. Now, all jokes aside, I don't actually spend all that much time on this server, but recently I decided to have a complete look down the list, scroll through every single item there, and I found some seriously cool stuff that I wanted to show you guys. Now, I've messaged NetEase, I've spoken with Joseph, and he has given me the green light to do a video talking about all this super cool stuff on the understanding that I make it abundantly clear to you all that everything we're going to showcase in this video is to be taken with the heaviest pinch of salt you can imagine. Like, genuinely, a lot of this stuff may just be stuff that is in the files from where NetEase were trying stuff previously. It could be that none of this is ever going to see the light of day. It could just be hangovers from files that were given by NetEase, etc, etc. But it could be that this is going to actually be stuff that could be added to the game in the future, so I just wanted to showcase it, talk about it, and see what you guys think. Now, if you're a veteran of EVE Online, you may recognise the ship on screen now. If you don't, stick around later on in the video, because we will be showcasing 3 exciting new unique hulls that are not currently in EVE Echoes. They are in EVE Online, so you may recognise them, but otherwise, stick around because we're going to be talking about that later. If you do enjoy this video, please let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel. Both those things do really help, and if you want to make sure you never miss a video, ding that notification bell and change it to all notifications. Finally, if you want to go the extra mile to support this channel, I do have a Patreon page, and I've just released an exclusive video to Patreons, which is exclusive to Patreons before it then comes public later on this week. Plus, I do have a Redbubble merchandise store as well that you can check out in the description. Anyway, that said and done, let's jump in and start talking about some of these top secret, super cool, maybe never to appear modules and items. Now, the first thing that I wanted to draw your attention to here is one of the items, or rather 2 of the items, that I do think are just hangovers from when NetEase was testing exploration. We have a Sisters of Eve Core Probe Launcher and a Sisters of Eve Scan Probe Launcher. Now, if you've played EVE Online, you know that a probe launcher is what you use to launch your scanning probes into space. You then play the little mini game where you kind of hone in on a particular signal, on a particular blip on a radar, essentially, as you increase the scanning strength by reducing the radius, and kind of play a game of almost hot and cold, getting down to that pinpoint accurate location. Now, the fact that we've got a core probe launcher and a scan probe launcher, to me insinuates that this was NetEase toying with what eventually became the wide resonance scanner and the narrow resonance scanner. One of these would have been for PvP, for scanning down other people's ships, the other being for scanning down like your nihilist dead spaces and things like that. So it's interesting here to see, for me at least, that NetEase apparently did at one point actually have a look at just porting that across directly. Sat there and looked at the scanning minigame and went, okay, that's kind of cool, but then how can we improve it? And I'll still be completely honest with you folks, I massively prefer the EVE Echoes, the noise and signal exclusion variant of the minigame. I think it's a lot more fun, I think it's a lot more interesting, and there's a lot more you can do with it. The probe launching and scanning in EVE Online, for me, it's something I do an awful lot, so maybe it's just because I've done it for so long, but it's kind of become just a tick-the-box exercise for me now, whereas I'm still, weeks in, absolutely adoring using the current scanning mechanics. But, as I said, interesting to know that apparently NetEase at one point did consider just porting that directly. Next up here is a missile launcher bomb. The meta level 5 variant of these is called a Siege Hammer missile launcher bomb. There are, of course, everything from, I think, Mark 5 upwards with a couple of others, but I thought it'd be nice to have a look at sort of the medium level one here. Now, I have no idea what a missile launcher bomb actually is. It says here that it's a device that occupies a slot in a missile launcher capable of preparing and deploying missiles for attack. Now, that sounds really kind of weird. Now, smart bombs are a thing in EVE Online. They're basically devices that you launch into space and they explode in a radius and are an excellent way to catch small ships or indeed even cloaked ships and deal massive amounts of damage to them. I'm not sure if that's what this is. Certainly the name would seem to insinuate that, plus the fact that it is prohibited in Empire regions, obviously because it does massive splash damage. It means you cannot even use it in low-sec. You would have to use it only out in null, which is pretty cool. That said, is this something that insinuates we could be getting ammo for missile launchers? It looks like you have to put this into a missile launcher according to the description, or is it going to be its own unique high slot? I don't honestly know. We can see that it's going to increase your signature radius when you have it equipped. You can activate it. It's a 10-second activation time, so what, it flies for 10 seconds and then explodes, and then it's 160 seconds before you can activate it again. Interesting point though is this little this stat at the top here, the minimum activation speed. You must be moving at least 1 meter per second in order to launch this, which to me insinuates that yes, it is something that drops in space. You launch it, it drops where you are, kind of like a destroyer launching an interdiction sphere. Then 10 seconds later, it's going to explode, so you want to be getting the hell out of the way of that, otherwise you could be hit by your own bomb. I don't know, that's my theory. I'd be interested to know what you guys think of this one here. We've got no relevant skills or anything. The only interesting stat, as I said, is that minimum activation speed. That to me insinuates that this could be the equivalent of a smart bomb in Eve Echoes. Again, whether I'm reading into this too much, whether it's something that could ever come to Eve Echoes, or if it's something that was just toyed with and never realised, who knows, but I find that one pretty exciting. On the subject of bombs, here's another really unusual example of a module that, again, I don't know what this is going to do, but it sounds really cool. A Caldari Navy Warp Disruption Bomb. Now, to me, that's kind of sounding like it's an interdiction sphere that kind of flashes into existence and then disappears, and that could be really cool. I don't know if this was just a prototype version of an interdictor sphere that NetEase were using and playing around with before the interdiction destroyers got added, or whether again this is something that maybe got scrapped entirely as a completely different concept that just didn't pan out, or if it's something coming in future. What we're looking at here, to me, again insinuates it's a bomb that gets launched into space, it then explodes, and everyone caught in its radius is going to have their warp disruptor scrambled for a brief period of time. That's pretty cool. It's not as heavy as, like, an interdiction sphere, but it's kind of that instant blap and burst to it. I can kind of see that as something that perhaps they toyed with and then decided that it's not going to come into the game. Maybe it is something for your future. I don't know. I like the concept of just being able to quickly scramble people's warp drives for, say, 10 seconds, so they can't run away for that brief period of time, but it's not as heavy as an interdiction sphere. It's kind of a, a proto-interdiction sphere. I don't know, to me that could be cool. Continuing the theme of the interdiction sphere launchers is one of my favourite little modules that I've spotted here. This is a Federation Navy Sensitivity Suppressor launcher, and again there are other meta levels available, just the Federation Navy was the one that stood out to me. Now, what this appears to do is it appears to be like a bubble that heads out into space like an interdiction sphere, but rather than just messing with their warp drives, it seems to affect inertia modifier, a 134% increase to inertia modifier of anyone inside that bubble. That, to me, is a really unique and cool concept, that basically you drop this into space and suddenly any ship that wants to move, accelerate, decelerate, realign, that kind of thing, is going to have a much harder time doing so. This works really well, obviously, in Twin with an interdiction sphere, because it makes it much harder for people to actually get out of that sphere. Possibly something that, again, NetEase toyed with, decided it was too powerful and then scrapped it. Maybe this is something coming in the future. I think as a frigate pilot and a destroyer pilot, this terrifies me. This genuinely terrifies me, but at the same time, imagine you're a battleship pilot. Imagine you're in something like a retriever, something nice and slow and heavy, and then someone drops one of these on you as well. Your align time has just gone from 30 seconds up to 20 minutes. Okay, maybe not that bad, but you get the concept. That's a really interesting idea. I would love to see something like this replacing sensor dampeners, in fairness. I think sensor dampeners genuinely do nothing in Echoes at the moment, but that's a really cool little module to mess with someone's inertia modifier, stops them orbiting you, stops them being able to escape you nice and easily if they need to turn around and warp to a distant object that's perhaps a different direction to the direction they're travelling in. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff you could do with that, and a sensitivity suppressor launcher just sounds absolutely badass. Next up is one of the most exciting ones in my personal opinion. This is called a turret barrage device, and this comes in multiple different meta levels. Like here we're looking at the Sisters of Eve variant, which is the meta level 7 one, but then it also comes in small, medium and large. So here we're looking at the Sisters of Eve medium turret barrage device. Now, what the heck is a turret barrage device? Well, looking at its stats, this appears to be somewhat similar to a gyro stabilizer, in that you fit it to a ship, you then activate this, and for the 12 seconds that it's activated, you get a 54.5% reduction to all your turret activation times, turning you into a Gatling ship. For like an Angel Cartel pilot, that is terrifying. I want to try this on a Cinnable, considering like a Cinnable has a ridiculously fast firing speed on its autocannons anyway. Imagine making those fire more than twice as quickly. That is a humongous DPS increase. And I imagine this is going to take up a low slot. It's got a very hefty power grid requirement there of 221 megawatts for a medium, whereas if we're looking at the large, if we double tap onto here, the large takes us up to 1,993 megawatts, and again, a 64.3% reduction to activation time, and the small turret barrage device there, only a 37.5% reduction here for 24 megawatts of power grid. That is, frankly, terrifying. I think a Drumiel with one of those equipped suddenly becomes really, really scary. Just the DPS boost on that is insane. I definitely think that's a low slot. Again, whether or not we see this actually added to the game, I don't know. This sounds like something that could be really heavily abused, but I kind of love it for that. I just really want to see a Drumiel or a Cinnable with 50% faster firing autocannons. That's just, I can't stop laughing at it. The concept in my head is just hilarious, and I love it so much. Now, beyond this as well, I'm going to keep this all flowing into one. We then have missile barrage devices. Now, these, the meta level that I've pulled out from the files here, are the Mordu's Legion, again, metal level 7, and again, they come in small, medium, and large, and you're looking at exactly the same thing. You activate it, and for 12 seconds of activation time, you have an activation time adjustment of 50% for all of your missiles, turning whatever missile launchers you're using into rapid-fire versions, which, again, is terrifying. That is literally halving your activation time, so for those 12 seconds, that is effectively doubling your DPS, which is just insane when you say it out loud, and that's probably why it's a power grid requirement of 246 megawatts for this thing. That is... oh man. I just want to see this. I really want to see this in action, but as you can see, these are not effective modules. They don't have, they've only got placeholder graphics. You cannot fit these to a ship. If I go into a fitting menu, these do not appear in the fitting modules. I cannot tell you if it's a high slot, a mid slot, or a low slot. I would assume it's a low slot because it appears to be a weapon upgrade like a gyro stabilizer or a ballistic control system. Let's have a look at the large variant. The large variant is a 60% reduction. Imagine a Raven firing torpedoes, or heck, a Typhoon firing torpedoes, 60% reduction to the speed. That's more than twice the firing rate that it currently has. That's insane. And if you go down to some of the Condor Interceptor with a 33.3% faster, again, that's a lot faster. That's a lot of extra DPS coming out of that. These are terrifying. I really want to try this. It's terrifying, but I really want to see it in action. Is that sadistic? I think that's sadistic. Next up is something that's not quite as flashy, perhaps, as a barrage system, but actually still really exciting in its own unique way, are the Capacitor Boosters. And again, these come in small, medium, or large size, and Crucible appears to be the meta level 5 variant. Now, as an aside here, I think this is possibly something that probably isn't going to be in EVE Echoes. I wouldn't be against it being added, but I get a feeling that this was a prototype capacitor battery. Now, in EVE Online, capacitor batteries, you put them into your ship, and all they do is increase the size of your capacitor. That's it. You cannot activate them. Then you have capacitor boosters, which are mid-slots that consume fuel to refill your capacitor. That means that when we look at a battery in EVE Echoes, which, when you fit it, increases your capacitor, but it has an activatable ability that adds a burst of energy into your capacitor bank. Basically what I'm saying is that the capacitor batteries in EVE Echoes kind of combine capacitor boosters and the capacitor batteries from EVE Echoes into one simple low-slot module. That said, I wouldn't be against a capacitor booster being added to Echoes. It's basically a mid-slot that will charge up your own personal capacitor at the cost of fuel. In this case here, you can see every 15 seconds, it will consume 300 gigajoules of fuel from your cargo hold and increase your capacitor, like a shield booster. It's kind of like a shield booster. You activate it, and every activation boosts up your capacitor just that little bit, which I personally feel is different enough from a capacitor battery to warrant inclusion, and certainly it means that it's kind of works like a Nosferatu that requires fuel rather than an enemy ship, but it means therefore you can use this from range without having to be in Energy Nosferatu range. That to me is a pretty cool concept, and we can see you've got these at small size here as well. There's the small capacitor booster, it consumes 150 gigajoules every 15 seconds, and then the large version here which consumes 600 gigajoules every 15 seconds as well. Massive power grid requirement on that one though there. Definitely that's designed for keeping a battleship or larger floating. 1022 megawatts, that just makes my head hurt. Being mainly a frigate and destroyer pilot, the fact that most of my ships have maybe upwards of like to 80 megawatts of power grid, looking at something that's over 1,000 just makes my eyes water. But I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks this is, as I said, just a thing that was dropped from the game after they decided that capacitor batteries were going to be activatable in Echoes. But I do still think this could have a really unique position if NetEase ever does decide to add this to the game. Now this one is kind of a little bit of a cheat, because we do actually know that this one is coming to EVE Echoes. It was confirmed in a developer Q&A fairly recently that micro jump drives were going to be added to the game. And again, these come in small, medium and large, various different metal levels. Here we're looking at the Ore medium micro jump drive. Now, for those of you who don't know, a micro jump drive is it's a propulsion module like an afterburner or a micro warp drive. I assume, therefore, it's going to be a low slot. That when you activate it, it has a short charge up time, possibly here 12 seconds, and then it jumps your ship instantly 100 kilometers in a straight line depending on the direction you're facing. Now in Echoes, the way that the stats are done here, it looks like it's going to have an activation time of 12 seconds and then 120 second cooldown, so 2 minutes before you can use it again. As it says here, these can be scrambled using warp scramblers, so if you are hit by a warp scrambler you cannot activate a micro jump drive, but essentially you activate it, 12 seconds later, you move 100 kilometers in a straight line in the direction your ship was facing. You suddenly reappear there like you've just done a quick jump. Obviously, a jump normally requires 150 kilometers of distance between you and your target. It also means that whatever speed you are moving at when you activated it and the direction you were traveling in is maintained. So if you're approaching a distant planet, for example, if you're in an encounter and you activate one of these, you're moving at 500 meters per second, you activate it, you jump 100 kilometers in the direction you're facing, and you will still keep facing that direction and moving at 500 meters per second when you land on the other side. These are really exciting, very useful on battleships, but can be very useful even on smaller ships if you just want to quickly jump into combat against someone, or as a way of trying to kite away from someone. They're excellent little modules and devices. Now, the inclusion of the micro jump drive also gives me hope that we might see the micro jump field generator, also known as a boosh, which is traditionally a module that is exclusive to command destroyers in EVE Online. Obviously, the command destroyers are currently in EVE Echoes, but booshes aren't. A micro jump field generator does the same thing as a micro jump drive, but for you and up to 25 ships in a short radius around you. It allows you to reposition an entire fleet using a command destroyer very, very quickly, and I'd love to see that added to the game. Micro jump drives, as I said, developer Q&A has confirmed these are on the way at some point, maybe August or September or sometime shortly after, but it's great just to see that they are in the game files. We can get a bit of a feel for how these are going to work, and it's something I can talk about and get excited about, which I'm very, very happy for. Here's another interesting one that definitely has a basis in EVE Online, and uniquely amongst these modules, notice that this does have a graphic attached. Now again, take that with a pinch of salt, but to me, that would insinuate that this one is more likely to be an actual thing added to the game. But again, who knows, I could be completely wrong, but let's talk about it anyway. Whether it is added or whether it's not added, let's talk about what this could mean. Now, in EVE Online, you can go into, again, forgive me on this one, I think it's sleeper sites. It's been a long time since I played intently in EVE Online in some of these sort of more recent editions. I think it's sleeper sites that you can get what are called polarized modules. And polarized modules essentially drop all of your resistances, etc., but massively increase your damage, turning you into an effective glass cannon. Now, what this looks like here is the basic polarizer, or rather the basic being the metal level. Rather than there being polarized modules that are unique modules, like you get a polarized railgun or whatever, This looks like it's something that you activate on your ship, kind of like you would have siege mode or sniper mode, that kind of thing. You'd fit one of these to your ship and activate it, and when you're activated, it would look like you're going to lose all of your resistances from your shield and armor, etc., making you an actual glass cannon, but then on the other side of things, massively increasing your damage output. Very useful for like a sniper ship, obviously not so much for a brawler. Oh, congratulations, you've activated your polarizer, you fire off one shot and kill whatever you were shooting at before the enemy fleet turns you into Swiss cheese. It says here, transfers the energy of the defense system into the weapon system, greatly increasing firepower, but reducing defensive power to almost zero. I think this could be a really interesting thing for fleets, especially if you're inside like a bubble or within armor link range and things like that, that you can actually, you know, not worry too much about the massive downsides of this, and you can just enjoy that massive increase to your offensive power. I think this is a really interesting one, and I would love to see these added. I think that adds a lot of play to the game. It gives you the ability to alpha someone off the grid almost immediately at the cost of, like here, a reactivation delay, 60 seconds. You can't just alpha them and then that's it. You've got 60 seconds that you need to survive with no resistances, no defensive systems, basically. Whilst your opponent, anything that has survived, just rips you a new one. So yeah, I really like this concept. I would love to see this added to Echoes. I think that would be really, really fun. Now, if sensor dampeners are the Gallente Federation's absolutely useless electronic warfare modules, then the signal amplifier certainly seems to be a really interesting alternative. Now, the description that the game gives here is, augments the sensor and electronic suite of the fitted ship. Benefits include additional locked targets, increased maximum target acquisition range, faster locking speed, and increased sensor strength. Now again, sensor strength at this point in the game does literally nothing. It's the skill that is, it's the statistic that's used in regards to electronic countermeasures, ECM, as to how quickly you will lose your lock, etc., that kind of thing. There, how well you can hold your lock against the target whilst the enemy fleet is trying to jam you. That kind of thing. Well, it's not going to go too much into ECM here. The interesting side of this, though, is that it would increase the amount of scan resolution, 14.04% faster scan resolution, and give you an additional maximum locked target, which on most ships isn't a humongous problem. On some ships, though, I do feel like, you know, you're sitting there with 4 or 5 locked targets and you want to be able to lock onto more stuff than that, but you just can't. This would work really nicely on logistics vessels, if nothing else, because you can stay locked onto your fleet and you can have multiple of them locked, more than you normally would, so you can cycle between who you need to heal that little bit easier. I think that's a really cool module. I do hope this one does come into the game. I just think that's really useful. It seems to only affect the ship that it's fitted to, rather than applying to anyone around you, but again, for a logistics vessel, I think that's pretty cool. If electronic countermeasures get added to the game, I think the signal amplifier here just helps you stick to your target that little bit better, stops them scramming your lock, that kind of thing. I like it. I like it as a concept. Even if it's only that scan resolution and maximum lock targets increase, I think that could be really beneficial to logistics. Now, this next one has technically been in the game files for a long time. When I first jumped onto Fulmination and I was trying to find myself a Predator Stasis Webifier, I typed in Predator Stasis and it came up with these as well, these what are called Heavy Stasis Grapplers. Now, a Stasis Grappler is essentially a Stasis Webifier. You can see here it's a flight velocity adjustment here of up to 80% reduction, which sounds utterly insane, until you realise it has an optimal range and an accuracy fall-off. Which means in this case, you're going to be 80% slower if you're within 1 kilometre, and then as you go up to 13 kilometres, that will drop to 40%, and as you go to 26 kilometres, that will drop from 40% that little bit lower. So it's better the closer you are to the target. Now, again, I don't know if this was just one of those things that NetEase were looking at a way to differentiate Stasis Webifiers. I do think Stasis Webs are a bit strong in Echoes and would love to see them reduced to 10 kilometre maximum range rather than 15, and I know that sounds like heresy, but the point is that Webifiers are not supposed to be able to grab kiting frigates. They're supposed to be able to grab brawlers. I just think the 15 kilometers is a little bit long, but hey, that's another topic for another video. What a Stasis Grappler does is it means that the closer the ship is, the better that effect is. And I don't know if this was something that was just used to, like, as a test for how to make Stasis Webifiers a little bit different to EVE Online, or whether it's designed here, it says, like, you know, it says here it's designed for being fitted to battleships and capital ships, therefore it's a unique module that we might see added in August that is designed for capital ships, and maybe some of them will get bonuses to those optimal ranges and accuracy fall-offs, etc. That it's just a better version of a Stasis Webifier. I don't know. I think it's an unusual way of doing things, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It uses a lot of power grid. The activation cost is not too bad, especially on a ship that size. 6 seconds activation time, it is going to chew it fairly quickly though. I just think it's a really interesting concept that you slow it down the closer it is, so it works better against brawling frigates, etc. But ones that are doing the kiting, etc., it's not as powerful as a Webifier perhaps might be. Who knows? Maybe I'm going to get my wish and Webifiers will be nerfed and the Stasis Grapplers therefore come in for those larger ships to work with there. I don't know. If you're a battleship or a battleship pilot, let me know what you think of that. If you are going to be flying capitals, again, what do you think? How do you think that'll affect your ship? Now, as far as modules go, I've saved the best two for last. Here we have the Sisters of Eve Data Analyzer, and next to it we have a Sisters of Eve Relic Analyzer. Now again, if you are familiar with EVE Online and Exploration, you might already be doing backflips at this, but for those of you who aren't, let me just explain what a Relic site is and what a data site is. So in EVE Online, when you are scanning and using your probes to find things, you're not just finding like wormholes and like the equivalent of Nihilist dead spaces and things like that, you will occasionally find relic sites and data sites. Now these are kind of similar to Inquisitors and Scouts as those appear in EVE Echoes. The difference is that you don't necessarily need to kill everything in there in order to open the caches. You can actually... Often it's a case that you go into that site and you either kill things until they drop the key that will allow you to open that cache, or you can go up and like hack into that cache and open it without using a key. And that appears to be what's happening here. The concept of this, ultimately, in my mind at least, is that you still have Inquisitors and Scouts dropping that kind of loot for fleets to sort of force their way through, but if you are a solo explorer, there is a chance of coming across a relic or data site that you can fly up to the cache in your exploration frigate with its covert cloak, and hopefully try and get through the little mini game, which are like connecting nodes on this great fun little hacking mini game, where you open up that cache and then take the blueprints or the data cores or whatever they're going to put inside it. You'd probably still have some pirates around, which mean that if you're in something like an explorer, a probe explorer that doesn't really have much in the way of sort of defenses or offensive capabilities, you're going to need to do that mini game quickly whilst the fleet of pirates slowly moves in on your position and then escape to safety. And that to me is just a really cool concept. Now again, this could just be a hangover. It could be a case that these were things that were added before NetEase decided to make Inquisitor and Scout anomalies the way that they made them. But I'm going to sit here and quietly hope that these are a sign that relic sites and data sites are going to be added for solo explorers to find, because that is an excellent way of making ISK on the side. You just make it not as lucrative as an Inquisitor or a Scout because it's a soloable thing, but it's still a way to get those blueprints, still a way to get those data cores, and perhaps even some of the nanocore materials could be found in these things, like the data that you use to make nanocores, or the data that you use to do like the Dead Space module upgrading, going from C-type to B-type to A-type to X-type. Finding those in data sites and relic sites could be really, really cool, and it would add another way to play the game in a solo way that's not as effective as doing it in a fleet, but still gives you something for when you don't have friends online, or if you just want to go solo exploring and finding these sites, and that excites me no end. Now, for those of you that I managed to get excited at the beginning of the video by looking at that ship, of course we now come to talking about these three. Now, these are not actually in the game files. I cannot pull the ship up themselves, but we can go in via the back door using the different nanocores that are available for them. First of all, we have the Sunasis red power core, Sunasis, however the heck you actually pronounce this. And if we scroll down, we can actually tap on the ship, which has no icon or anything, but we can start looking at its stats: 4 highs, 2 mids, 3 lows, 2 of each rig types, plus some of its defenses there. I'm not going to go into this too much because clearly that cargo hold is not going to be the same when this eventually launches, if this eventually launches, which again is the big pinch of salt. But if we come through, this is the Sunasis, or Sunasis, however the heck you want to talk about that. This is the Society of Conscious Thought Destroyer. This is a unique faction ship that are available in EVE Online, that you can get, and I think the Society of Conscious Thought, if I remember correctly, are to do with the Jove, which are sort of that esoteric, enigmatic faction that lives in its own unique nebula that no one can access because it doesn't have actual stargates. It's a really cool, unique looking ship, and as I said, it is in EVE Online. If we have a look at the trait description here, there is nothing. Now in EVE Online, it has a 25% bonus to small energy turret, small hybrid turret, and small projectile turret damage, so plus 25% turret damage, or 25% bonus to light missile and rocket damage, so missile torpedo damage, a 50% bonus to drone hit points and damage, and a 37.5% bonus to scanner probe strength. They're ships that don't have any skill bonuses. You don't have to train something to get that particular bonus. That is just inherently in the ship. Kind of like the Shangyue and Kanyue destroyers and battle cruisers with the prototypes, how it's just roll bonuses, they don't have trainable skill bonuses. For the rest of it, as I said, I'm not going to take this too seriously, but it does look pretty interesting as a destroyer. I think it's pretty much on par with like the Shangyue prototype. It's nothing too exciting, but it does look absolutely badass. There's no two ways about that. You saw me spinning it at the beginning of the video. It looks really cool. But what if destroyers aren't your thing? Well, let's go to the Gnosis Polymerization Nova Core, and if we scroll right the way down to this one and tap through, again through here, this is the battle cruiser for the Society of Conscious Thought, and you can see you've got the Society of Conscious Thought standard skin there, and then the Polymerization Nova, which does actually look fairly reminiscent of the special skin that you can get for the Shangyue prototype destroyer. So perhaps there is definitely some referencing here going on. Now again, the Gnosis is it's the Society of Conscious Thought battle cruiser. Here, if we look in the trait description, there are still no stats or anything here. Again, in EVE Online, it is 25% bonus to medium turrets, or to... let's have a look. I can't remember all of these off the top of my head. A 50% bonus to command burst area of effect range, 25% bonus to heavy missiles and heavy assault missiles, so medium missiles, a 50% bonus to drone hit points and damage, 37.5% bonus to core and combat scanner probe strength, and can use command burst modules, which... yeah, it's what you'd expect from a battle cruiser. This, again, kind of appears to be similar to the Kanyue prototype, in that it's designed primarily around scanning and exploration, plus a decent bit of combat potential, and it doesn't require you to train into any particular skill. So if you're a missile user and you fancy flying one of these, it gets bonuses to missiles, but if you use cannons or railguns or lasers, it gets bonuses to those too. Kind of like the Celestis, or the closer, I guess, more like the Scorpion gets bonuses to those. It's also just a really unusual looking ship, and I know a lot of people quite like this. I love that sort of shimmering effect around the rear fins of the ship. It's a very, very unique silhouette here in EVE. And if we get these in EVE Echoes, which again is not guaranteed, just because it's in the game files doesn't mean it's necessarily coming. Finally then, we have the Praxis Afterglow of Death core. Afterglow of Death. Just... so let's have a look at what the Praxis is. This is a battleship, and it's a really cool looking battleship. That's its standard variant there. You can see that sort of like sphere, that sort of circle ringing around it with super sharp points. It looks kind of like if the Amar religion decided it wanted to embrace Sanchez Nation as a design concept. But then we have the Afterglow of Death, and just how awesome does that look? Getting that sort of red and gold and black coloration to it. That turns a really unusual looking ship into an absolute monstrosity, and I love it. Now again, we don't have any trait descriptions here. I am going to pull up on EVE University what the Praxis's roll bonuses and that are here. Again, it doesn't have any trainable skills, it is just roll bonuses, which are a 20% bonus to, 25% bonus to large hybrid turrets, large energy turrets, and large projectile turrets, so 25% to large turrets, 25% to heavy missiles, cruise missiles, and torpedoes, again, so 25% to large missile and torpedo damage, 50% bonus to drone hit points and damage, and a 37.5% bonus to core and combat scanner probe strength. Now, again, that makes it a very unusual ship. It's a battleship that kind of has bonuses towards scanning, so it does fit towards kind of the Sisters of Eve ships, but you don't need to necessarily train into it, and it just looks awesome. Like, I cannot get over how cool these look. And being a destroyer pilot, being a cruiser pilot as well, sorry, a destroyer and frigate pilot mainly, the Sunasis does actually really appeal to me. I love the look of this little vessel. It looks a little bit like a crawfish, crayfish, crawdad, whatever you want to call it there, little lobster-like thing, with sort of an energy field at the front. I really want to get into this and fly it. I just cannot find any way to summon this into the game files. I can view the nanocores, but the actual ships themselves, I cannot find the code that I would use to bring one of these into existence to actually fly it, which is probably for the best, because as I said, with a cargo hold capacity of, what, however many nines that is, cubic meters, I think that would probably be the least of my troubles, but I really like these. I think that's really cool. Anyway, folks, that does bring us to the end of this video. I hope this has got you nice and excited. Please, again, let me remind you that this is all completely subject to change. Some of these modules may come into live, some of them may not. Maybe none of them will ever see the light of day on the Aurora server. I don't know, but hopefully that's given you some ideas of where EVE could be going in the future, and if you have suggestions and things like that, please, for goodness sake, get onto the EVE Echoes Discord, drop them into the suggestions channel. If you think some of this sounds really cool, talk to the developers about them. Give your ideas, give your thoughts and opinions on this. I really hope we do get those Society of Conscious Thought ships at some point in the future. I'm still waiting, though, for the standard, like Mordu's Legion and Sisters of Eve, and indeed the standard Yan Zhong stuff to be added. I think there's some really cool modules in that there as well, so let me know in the comment section down below which of these excites you most, what you think about these. Do you think I'm right about some of these? Do you think I've missed something? Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Otherwise, folks, thank you ever so much for watching this exciting video right the way through to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!